right there. Thank you, Ken, of course. Thank you. So welcome everyone, flower petals to the feet of Ken for drawing us together in this beautiful circle, this dedicated circle for the work, the study, and the advancement of this field for right and good care for the people that we work with, the people that we study with, for our own hearts, souls, and minds. So in order to dignify and to dedicate ourselves to this time that we have together, join me now, please, in allowing all distractions or agitations or interruptions to intrude to your sense of self, to the sense of wonder, to the sense of expanded wisdom that we share, offer, and receive for each other. In doing so, please allow your hands to step away as if they would be footprints from a device. This is a device. This is a device. This is a device. Those of us who shared our studies together know that in doing so, we symbolically, we generously, we intentionally, and we defiantly create this space that is free from intrusion, from agitation, from interruption, because we have symbolically removed our dependency upon those things for the moment. It's significant. It has a value. It has an impact and an influence. So join me now in allowing your hands to step away from a device so that one hand can feel the other, so that one hand can touch the other to find restfulness with the other. That's enough for the moment. Even if there's a little tug in the urgency we feel to be attached to a device, let the tug occur. And allow your hands, one to the other, wherever they are, and for any amount. See how that feels. And then breathe out. Letting the in-breath occur. It's supposed to. It happens. And then give it back. Generously, fearlessly, on your own. And then do that again so that it belongs to you. For the moment. It's no big deal. It's just your breath. It's weightless. And if it is weightless, It's easy to carry. And then do that again. As you welcome yourself here. As you welcome yourself here. Unencumbered by any distraction. Uninterrupted. And with gratitude to all the preconditions that allow us to study here together. Just like this. Sahana Bhavatu. Sahano Punaktu. Sahaviryam Karavavahai. Tejatsvina Mahita Matsuma Virvishahai. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Namaste.
Now I feel ready. It is a beautiful thing. It just sets my mind right. It's been too long since I've heard you do that, so thank you. All right, so we're going to start tonight's class. We're going to discuss the koshas. I'm going to bring a little different twist to it. We'll go over, kind of lead you through it along. Mostly I'm going to ask Veronica's feedback on some things, and we'll make it a discussion and welcome any questions and input as we go along. I always like to start out all the philosophical discussions with this slide. Anything that entails teaching yoga here puts us in a little different place. And the more that we become aware of the fact that the information we are getting has filtered through a lot of times through the lens of the colonization and commercialization of yoga. So as we learn more, we consistently try to present it in the best light possible with the most authentic versions of things. But as always, we are Westerners dealing with Eastern philosophy, and know that we are doing our best to stay as accurate as possible and do the best we can until we know better. And then we know better, we do better. Maya Angelou. All right, so when we start talking about the koshas, to me personally, it's always been one of those things that's a little fuzzier than the rest of the energy systems that we learn in yoga. So we all are familiar with this picture, something similar to this, where we see the images of the chakras set up with the symbols and the different petaled lotuses, and then you can see Eta and Pingala working its way through in that double helix. So we have this visual to kind of wrap our heads around what these energy systems are. When we get to the koshas, we're frequently given this model that looks kind of like the rings of Saturn. And we have our bodies as the planet in the middle, and the etherical levels running out from that. And we don't get a whole lot of explanation and tying together of how it all works. So part of what I was hoping to present tonight, and hopefully it clarifies for me as much as for everybody else, some of the questions that you may have about the koshas and how they work. So we do know that of the five koshas, the Anandamaya kosha is the physical body, the Pranamaya kosha being the vital life source, the breath type body, Manomaya kosha being the mind's thoughts, emotional body, Vijnanamaya kosha being the intellect, the wisdom, the thought process, balancing of the mind, and the Anandamaya kosha being that bliss, that connection with the divinity. So I had found some new information. I had started to look more towards sites that originate from India and have some kind of rooting in the more philosophical states and are rooted out more. So I found some of these charts here that start to bring in different thoughts on the kosha. So when you look at the Anandamaya kosha here, and you start looking at what is the state of well-being when the Anandamaya kosha is balanced and working well, the muscles are relaxed, we have flexible joints, conservation of energy, disturbed muscular tension, stiff joints. So things that you can actually notice in the body. The Pranamaya kosha, you start to get into the movement of the breath. So when we start to think how these over here in the disturbed states or in the well states fit together, you can see how they build upon each other. And like why when we're looking at the breath in a yoga practice, how it's not just symbolic of the physical body, it also moves into these etherical levels. So when we start to think about how this interconnects, we can start to think about the physical manifestations of the koshas rather than just seeing them as these kind of etherical visionary processes. It becomes more of a substantial, tangible element. So I'm going to pop us out of here for a moment. So when you start looking at the koshas in this manner and you're looking at the manifestations, you can start to think about how yoga and yoga therapy can affect the etherical body and not just the physical body. And so much of what we've always focused here on in the States is just that physical manifestation. And whether it's the asana practice or working on pranamaya, the prana, not thinking about the pranamaya kosha and how it's tying in together, we can see the physical attributes of working with the breath in the instance of, say, you're using a prolonged exhale and it's going to immediately start to slow down your metabolic system. It's going to trigger that rest and digest. And with the breath is disturbed, if it's restricted or uncomfortable, that's a disturbance, yes, in the body and the mind, but it's also a disturbance in the energetic body. Veronica, would you like to add some thoughts to this or opinions, observations?
No. I think what is key here is that we look for what is observable and what is recordable rather than what we are imagining or what we remember. It's easiest to do that when we look at our bodies. We can assess sensation through our five senses. And that, I think what Ken is emphasizing here is do what's easiest longer. Because when we look at what we can assess in our physical bodies, and the table that Ken just had brought up, we are in a way also assessing and accessing, according to the Yoga Sutras, what's going on in our emotional lives, maybe even our spiritual lives, maybe, if that's accessible or not. But we don't have to start at the hard stuff. We can look at the easy stuff and use that as a kind of a guidepost to learning and to applying what works, what makes it easier, what makes it better. Makes sense?
Thank you. So, does anybody have any questions on this? All right. And I'm going to go back to the next chart for a moment. So when we start to look at the characteristics of what each kosha brings and how they manifest in different ways. Looking at, say, the Anandamaya kosha here in the first column, the characteristics is either inertia or movement. Pranamaya kosha is always movement, because it's always the movement of energy. Energy isn't static. Manomaya kosha is passive decision making, so it's in the brain and the thought process, the acquisition of knowledge for Vijnanamaya kosha, and then intuition and idea generation in the Anandamaya kosha. Qualities being passivity, activity, knowledge, intellect, ego, and happiness. But all of these can be observed in the physical body.
Mm-hmm.
So if something is off in the Annamaya kosha, there's either going to be excessive passivity or excessive movement. There's not going to be that balanced space. So if you're seeing that, then you're knowing that something is off in the Annamaya kosha. Pranamaya kosha is very observable in the breath. If the breath is restricted, if it's not, if it's free flowing. And being that I had to do a lot of my level 3 virtually, it became very interesting how when you're with somebody physically, it's much easier to see their breath, but you could start to really notice these subtle movements in the shoulders, just the subtle movement in the collarbone, things that you wouldn't normally notice, but being in a situation where you need to really be able to observe somebody's breath and they're not in the same space as you, virtually you learn to develop this skill where you could see the breath. You could actually notice these very small movements, increases and decreases in volume that give you key information as to what's going on in this person's physically and also in their kosha. The Manomaya kosha, noticing, passivity, decision making. People, when you're talking to them, you're interviewing them when they're coming into your studio or into a session for yoga therapy, their ability to respond. And that comes through Vijnanamaya kosha and Anandamaya kosha as well. They're going to either be very comfortable and relaxed and giving you freely the information, or there's going to be some kind of distraction in the thought process. They're going to have difficulty making a decision on whether they're going to come back or they're going to do this. So all of these give us this opportunity to observe not just what's going on physically, but what's going on energetically, giving us a better idea of how to approach both the yoga practice and yoga therapy as we can give it out as yoga therapists. I'm going to pull back out of here. So as we start to look at the koshas outside of the rings of Saturn, we start to see it more of these layers of our bodies within within this whole system that's interconnected. And while it is tied to both the physical and the energetic body, we haven't always looked at it that way here in the West anyways. It always comes up as this separate version. I'm not quite sure why it has always been spun that way, but we always get it as, you know, the rings of Saturn, whereas we have all these multiple images. And as I like to go with pop culture, there is a portion in the first Doctor Strange movie where he's in Kamar-Taj getting trained, and the Ancient One pulls out all these different books. One of them is the chakra chart. The other one is the traditional Chinese medicine chart. The other one is like an MRI. And she says to him, it's like, what are these? And he gets all bent out of shape. And she's like, they're each maps of what's going on, but they're incomplete separately. So when we start to look at the chakra system, the nadis and the koshas is separate. Each one is incomplete in and of itself. But the combination of the three give you this greater vision of how the energetic body works. Make sense? Would you like to elaborate, Veronica, or add anything to that?
I love that. That really resonates with me, Ken. Thank you so much. Masterful. And I think that rings of Saturn, also might just come because how are we going to communicate that concept? If we have a piece of paper and a drawing, and we're bound kind of by the construct of how we actually visually absorb something, which is a picture. A picture reduces us to 2 dimensions, and so we're not Harry Potter-esque yet, where we can put a globe or right, something 3-dimensional and moving and interactive. So I think our brains try to do the best we can. And I love very much the map idea of the jnana focus, of bringing a greater awareness, a greater attention through paying attention. And that if you have like a pond, right, where you step in at the edge of the pond is very shallow, goes up to your ankle bone. Where you untie your rowboat and keep rowing, you're going to go deeper and deeper, deeper into the center area of the pond or the lake. If you throw a stone from the edge of the pond, it's going to land in the shallow water, but it will make ripples. Likewise, if you throw a stone really far into the center of the pond, it'll go deeper, but it'll still make ripples. And I think that's the concept too of the kosha model, where you're still seeing echoes and reflections and resonances of different bodies, That's what the koshas literally translate to, their bodies. And so it's not a schizophrenic moment. There's an interactivity right now with all of us that we're feeling something, sensing something, translating something, interpreting something, responding in some way, absorbing something, and not even knowing. And this is all happening simultaneously, resonating with each other like a pinball machine, having an effect, and somehow that stone is hitting the bottom, no matter how shallow or deep it is, it still makes a ripple. And where we choose to watch the ripple effect of the resonance is what's going to key us into what's going on with everything else in all of our bodies.
I love just looking around the board and seeing everybody kind of like, And as you start to think about it that way, you start to realize the depth of us as human beings is not just this physical manifestation that we always see. That's the most easy, but everything that's going on underneath that is always observable through those ripples. It's not quite as mystifying as it always seems to be. So, in the thing that I found, I wanted to get your opinion on this, Veronica, because they separated out as the gross body or stula body or stula sararia, the food sheath or the gross portion of the vital air sheath constitutes the gross body. Pranamaya kosha, or the vital air sheath, it interconnects with annamaya kosha, the physical body, and manomaya kosha. There's nanamaya kosha and anandamaya koshas. It's associated with the subtle body. Subtle body, the portion of the vital air sheath combined with the mental intellectual sheaths form the subtle body. So they're separating out Annamaya kosha pretty much from the other parts, whereas it's not considered so much part of the subtle body. Do you feel that that is a correct interpretation?
Are you asking me?
Yes. I was just want your opinion on it.
Well, it depends. It depends. And what it largely depends on is how culpable or cooperative our Annamaya kosha really is with us. Because in a healthy body, let's define what is a healthy body. A healthy body, maybe for the purposes of this conversation, is a body that does what you want it to. In other words, inhale, raise your arms. Okay, I just did that. I wanted it and I got it. So in that respect, I have a healthy body, if for the sake of this conversation, right? And in that regard, you can say, okay, I don't have to think about that. In a body that has been made vulnerable by disease, that is all you think about. And it no longer becomes disposable or dispensable or ignorable. And in that regard, we have an opportunity to observe the not so subtle ripples of sensation or you can even say the very, very attention grabbing sensations of our body that indicate to us how we respond to the indications of pain or disease or adaptation or treatment or diagnosis. And in that arena, it becomes a very front and center observable aspect that can no longer be ignored. So it depends, Ken, I think, on rationalizing, assessing. If the Annamaya Kosha is not giving us trouble, you can bet we're not going to think about it. All you need is a root canal. And suddenly, how you respond to resistance in your body is extremely indicative of how you respond to resistance in everything else in your life.
Awesome. Anybody have any questions, thoughts? I'm just going to sit here and listen tonight.
I'm sorry, Ken. I kind of have a thought, and I'm not sure if it like plays in with what you're talking about with, because you said that they had the Annamaya Kosha separated out from the others, correct?
It considered it as the gross body as opposed to the subtle body.
Okay.
So the food sheath or the actual atoms and molecules portion of the body.
All right. I have to think on it more. Sorry.
Well, that's part of the process, is that, and that's why I wanted to kind of bring it up this way, because we don't always break it down and start thinking about it this way. We just kind of say, okay, this is the subtle bodies and this is how they work. So
well, I guess because I was kind of thinking, when people have trauma and maybe they lock it away in a part of their brain and it's in there and they don't remember it's there, or they don't recognize it because it's so deep within. Like, how does that fall within the layers of the koshas? Because maybe it's manifesting physically, but it's really something that's going on in here.
it's going to sit energetically, and correct me if I'm wrong, Veronica, in the Manamaya Kosha, because that's in the thought process, that's in the emotional portion. So if you are holding that in, it's going to reside energetically there. But because the bodies are permeable and the ripples roll through every portion, it is going to manifest and be observable in the Annamaya Kosha in the grossest level, because that's what's easiest for us to see.
So explain the difference to me again between the Manamaya and the Janamaya, because I know that there's like a subtle difference, even though they're both the mind. There's a difference, and I just don't remember what it is.
So Vijnanamaya Kosha works on knowledge and wisdom, whereas Manamaya Kosha is passive knowledge, decision making, and it's also rooted in the emotional body as well. So it's all in the more reactive portion of us, whereas Vijnanamaya Kosha is more about the deeper levels of understanding.
So the Janamaya might be once the trauma is brought to the forefront and you have this knowledge and then you start working with it, it would bring you more into that kosha.
Yes, because you're not going to resolve that trauma in just one space. That, again, the bodies are permeable, so
Right, it'll
everything is
trickle through all of the other koshas.
right. So, like Veronica stated, you start with what is the easiest, what is most observable, and what we can work with. So as we start to work with the body and the breath, that takes that portion out and makes it a little less strenuous on them. So as they're working with, say they're working with another professional to break down and work through the trauma, what we're offering them is a way to calm the mind, get rid of the stress in the body as much as they can, and self-regulate through the process of untying those knots that created the trauma in the other koshas and psychologically.
Thanks.
Was that right, Veronica?
To your edge, to where there's no harm done. Where there is no harm done.
Which I forget to say that sometimes, but should always be the most important thing, is to not take it to the point of giving people the grace to work in a space that they can be comfortable in, and that is not going to cause harm or deepen the trauma or the stress. So I will thank you all for showing up, and thank you, Veronica, for everything.
It's wonderful to be
Yeah.
here. Thank you, Ken, for organizing this, for bringing us together. Thank you all for your interest, for sure. Supported and encouraged.